Okay, let's get started. Let's turn to Genesis chapter 32, and let's read for context beginning at verse 24. I know you guys know that section, but it's not very long. 24 through 32, and that's the end of this chapter. 24 through 32, and then I'll make some comments. So somebody lead out with the text.
So Jacob was left alone, and the man wrestled with him till daybreak. When the man saw that he could not overpower him, he touched the socket of Jacob's hip, so that his hip was wrenched as he wrestled with the man. Then the man said, "Let me go, for it is daybreak." But Jacob replied, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." The man asked him, "What is your name?" "Jacob," he answered. Then the man said, "Your name will no longer be Jacob, but Israel, because you have struggled with God and with men and have overcome." Jacob said, "Please tell me your name." But he replied, "Why do you ask my name?" Then he blessed him there. So Jacob called the place Peniel, saying, "It is because I saw God face to face, and yet my life was spared." The sun rose above him as he passed Peniel, and he was limping because of his hip. Therefore to this day the Israelites do not eat the tendon attached to the socket of the hip, because the socket of Jacob's hip was touched near the tendon.
Wow, what a marvelous story. This morning, we're really going to focus in on verses 31 and 32. And as I was beginning to read the text, and my text read, "And the sun rose on Jacob, and he crossed over Peniel, and he walked away with a limp." My goodness, that's just so powerful. The sun rose on Jacob. He crossed over Peniel, and he walked away with a limp. My goodness, that really captures my heart. So that is the basis of what we're going to be looking at today, and next week. We're going to wrap this up next week, and then we'll go on to chapter 33 after the first of the year. So didn't plan it that way; it just kind of worked out that way. So by way of review, we looked at what kind of the bigger picture of what's going on in Jacob's life is he was blessed through this experience, this struggle. He was blessed. He is now in a new place, and he has power. He's renamed as a symbol of that blessing. Part of that blessing was a renaming. The naming has to do with identity. It has to do with our core being. And because he was renamed, something new had occurred deep within inside of him. He now has the power to rename. And guys, this is so core to our experience as men. If you look back into your lives, when you were younger, you would name things. You are naming things today differently than you did when you were a younger man. Naming means putting labels, identifying, categorizing. You see differently, so you name differently. That's the idea. From the core of our being is where this resides. Out of that creates perceptions. The core of our being creates how we see. And how we see then is everything, informs how we name, how we label things, how we categorize, how we interact with other people. Everything is from the inside, all from the core of our being, how we derive our identity, who we think we are, who we perceive ourselves to be. And of course the gospel is central to this part. This whole thing about transformation is coming to an understanding, guys, experientially, not up here, but experientially, of who we are in Christ and who Christ has made us to be already. That's really the essence of what we've been talking about. So that to me is a helpful little graphic. And as I was thinking this week, I came up with this idea of how I want to share, or how I see this story. I see this story as a small as a small piece, the full story is like 3 boxes inside of each other. Those 3 boxes you open up, they're all the same. But this story here in Genesis 33 is actually reflective of, and kind of a microcosm of a larger story of Jacob's life. And I'll explain why. What is happening in condensed form in this story has happened in Jacob's life. And what has happened in Jacob's life is part of what I would call the great story. The great story. And you're thinking, gee, what is he talking about? Depicted by the gospel of Jesus Christ. The great story of descent and death and resurrection. If you look at every really great movie, it has the great story. There's only one story, and that is this great story that Jesus demonstrated for us in the incarnation and the crucifixion and the resurrection. And so I'm seeing it at 3 levels. And so we're going to be moving back and forth. That what is an example within the story itself is actually something that is part of Jacob's life, and it's part of our life because we're part of this great story too. So you'll see it as we go through. Well, part of this great story, and as we reflect back, there is an arrow that is ascending, and I call this the heroic path. The first half of life is what I have here. It is the part 1 of the great story, that there is an ascent. There is a need for a young man or a young woman to carve their way out in society, to try to discover who they are. It's about acquiring. It's about what am I going to do? That is what is the all-time question at a graduation party? Well, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? Because our culture and the way we frame our thinking is so in tune with this whole thing of ascent and acquiring and becoming. And who are we going to do it with? And all of these things. And they're necessary, and they're not wrong by any means. I happen to think that our culture is stuck here, that we really haven't moved on. This is what is reflective about our culture. And of course, advertising would be the key thing. It's all about getting more and acquiring and becoming more secure, more protected. And that's all what this is about. In Jacob's life, as we look back from this story, we see reflected in his early years with mom, his need to acquire the blessing, the birthright. He acquired through deception and tricked his brother into provided a really nice warm soup on a cold day, and he acquired. Ding, ding. And then later on, his mother got involved, and they stole the blessing by dressing up to be somebody else. Oh boy, that was full of meaning there too, because that's what our culture teaches us, that we need to dress up, be somebody else to be accepted. And so these are things that were coming deposits into Jacob's life. And there's the first half of life for him. I think the transition is when he left his home. Is when he left and encountered Uncle Laban. He met his match, so to speak. So there's the first half of life. In the story itself, it's depicted by Jacob early on in this chapter, where he's maneuvering and manipulating and strategizing, and he's sending his gifts to his brother, and he's separating. These are all things he is doing in the name and for the purpose of self-protection. Do you see that? So there's where we get a box within a box. He's doing those things. He has done those things, and it's part of our life as well. So there's the first half of life, the arrow ascending. Now, as we move on, there's a tipping point, and it's I use the word slipping. Oh, there's a point in life, guys, where we start to feel, boy, the train underneath is starting to slip out from under us. And it's unnerving. We feel like we're losing control. And oftentimes, those of us who are dads, we have teenagers that, boy, they get on the bus one morning and come back a different person. And then we got to deal with all of this chaos. And, I get I get to hear a lot of stories from troubled dads that, man, I just don't understand Junior. Why is he so defiant? And these are real realities of life that has a bigger picture. Junior's trying to ascend, and through that ascension, which comes out sideways sometimes, it's loosening the soil under our feet, and we feel like we're losing control. And there you go. It's about slipping from the perception of control. Notice I say perception. Yes?
It's amazing. I thought, of course, when I had my kids, and it feels so noble being an adopted dad, but the idea is all of a sudden you're disconnected from living vicariously through your children. Up till now, you're on the same, they're listening to you, they're learning from you, you're watching them, you're proud of them, everything going, but they're going in a direction that you don't identify with. And all of a sudden, your joy of watching them do things is diminishing.
Yeah, in fact, that you resist.
Yeah,
you try to our general tendency is to try to reel them in.
Yep.
Yeah.
Change the direction.
Yeah, and it's so common. It's all of us have been through this, but this is the tipping point in our lives, is where we sense we're starting to lose control, and of course, in the story, this would be Jacob, setting his family aside. Still, he's doing this because he's out of fear that he's going to lose everything. Sorry, guys. Then comes the struggle to maintain control. And guys, this can go on for years. This represents a large chunk of our adult life, is struggling, trying to keep all the balls under the surface and relationships intact, and my checking account intact, and my savings, and providing for the future, and all of these things that, guys, over time, they just kind of wear us out. And there's this struggle that's going on in our lives. And of course, in the story itself, it's the wrestling match. High resistance at the beginning, but something happens. Because during the course of the time, Jacob learns to let go. And that is what life, in my opinion, guys, that's what life is trying to teach us, is to let go, is to try to understand that we're not in control. We're in control of so little. There's a much larger picture, and part of this way of descent modeled by Jesus Christ is about letting go. It's about the cross. It's about, except a grain of wheat fall into the ground and die, it abides alone. But somehow through this death experience comes new life. And that new life piece is what we're going to look at this morning. This is all review of what we've already looked at all this. The struggle culminates at the bottom when we as a man, we reach what I didn't coin this term, but I've adopted this term, the necessary limit, where we bottom out, and it could be through sin, it could be through a tragic experience, it could be slow degradation over time, a number of ways where we get to a point in our lives and say, I can't do this. I just simply can't do this. And I'm not saying it's a one-time thing. We say that, and then 2 weeks later we're back up trying to make it happen. But over time, we reach what we call a necessary limit, and we're open. We open ourselves up to the sacred wounding. And that sacred wounding, of course, in the story, is the touch from the stranger, where something happens. There's no recoil. It's an allowing, it's a receiving of something new that could be painful, but it's brought into our lives as something healing and has effect from there on, as we'll see this morning. So the necessary limit story after story is out there in the great story of men and women who have absolutely reached the bottom. But through that, letting go, something marvelous happens. Amazing story. That is the story we love to watch.
Christmas Carol.
The Christmas Carol, yeah. Oh, perfect example. That's the story. Yeah. And that same story, we watch it over and over again. We think it's a new story. It's not a new story. It is the story. It's the great story. This man had to go through the struggle of the night of the three angels, and he had a death experience. And by golly, when the sun rose, he was a new man.
Yeah, great story.
Great story. You ever seen the Muppets version
No.
with Michael Caine?
Really?
Guys, if you can rent that, I recommend that. That is a really good version of the Christmas Carol. Michael Caine is Scrooge. Yeah, that's really good. So, where we are this morning then is the sun rose on Jacob. He crossed over Peniel, and he walked away with a lamp. Those are the three things. So, first of all, there's a dawning. Now, in this case, in the story, the sun is coming up, and I can just feel after that darkness of night, the sun. You guys know what it's like for the warmth of the sun to feel on your shoulders? We've all felt that in the morning, and the warmth and the feeling that gives us. Well, I would like to say it's like that. But in the dawning experience, note that in the story, nothing has changed. His brother is still in pursuit. As far as Jacob knows, unless somehow we would have to read into the text to think that the angel told him it's going to be okay. There's nothing there. As far as he knows, his brother still is in pursuit. But his eyes have been changed. His perception has been changed. And something new has happened. And so it's the removing of the illusion. It's receiving new eyes to see. That's why he can rename new, because he has new eyes. He has new eyes to see. So there's the dawning. And then the crossing over. The dawning leads to the crossing, Peniel, face of God. And remember his words. He says, I have struggled, I have met God face to face, and I've survived. He met death. He met death in his own words. But yet he crossed over death into something new. Does that remind you of another story? Of course, the resurrection. Jesus went to the cross and faced death. And 3 days later, Peniel. And there was resurrection. Do you see?
There's something implicit in the story. It's not just that he comes to an awareness that, I'm not in control, but under that there's awareness that all is well.
Uh-huh.
Somehow being in control doesn't mean all is well. Being
That's
out of
really a
control
good point.
is well.
All is well, even when things, at least at this point, he doesn't know it's all well. We live our lives, Bill, that everything's got to be in its place for it to be well.
But let me rephrase it. All will be well.
Yeah.
I mean, it's okay. I
Yeah.
might get killed by Esau
See you, Mike.
tomorrow. Esau might chop my head off.
Yeah.
But all is well.
Regardless.
Yeah.
That's the new eyes right there. That's the new eyes to see. So there's a crossing over, and he's crossing over Peniel, the face of God. He's now on the resurrection soil. That's the idea. And the last thing here is that he has a different walk. He has a different walk. He has a different look. And I would venture to say that all of you have met in our lives an older woman or an older man who has a different walk. And I'm not talking about here generally a limp, but although it could be. But there is something about sitting down in our younger days with an older man or an older woman and looking at those eyes and seeing wisdom and acceptance and love. And like at this moment, I feel like the most important person in the world. That is what this process does in our lives.
The common story I like that happens is you have this tension between a parent and a child, and the child turns to the grandparent, the grandmother, the grandfather, for comfort or for understanding, and the grandparent will intervene at that sometimes, and I would say, hey, look, everybody relax a little bit. This is You see that a lot in shows. I
Yeah.
just watched Princess Bride the other night. You know,
Yeah.
and the grandfather was talking about it.
Yeah, that is a good story, yeah.
The grandparents are usually have arrived there.
Uh-huh, yeah. So what time is it, guys?
20 after.
20 after, okay. I'm going to show a clip. I've moved through this pretty quickly because I'm going to show a clip out of a major motion picture that's pretty old now, but I'm sure you've all seen it. And I've edited the sections to show the story is the great story. And the movie is called Castaway, starring Tom Hanks. And his character is Chuck Nolan in the movie. Do you guys all know the movie? Because Chuck is a driver. The context, he's a FedEx high-ranking person that travels around and tries to get people to work faster. And his whole thing is you're going to see a scene here at the beginning. Relentless is our goal. Relentless. It's all about the goal. It's all about the drive. But then the movie is about his transformational experience where he wrestles with this experience on the island. And through that experience, which in this case is 4 years, he is on the road to descent. He comes to his necessary limit. And you're going to see it in the text. It's a 10-minute clip, so we might run over a little bit. But I'd like you to see it. I'd like you to see the whole thing in its entirety. I may stop it a little bit. But we're going to work with this clip here today, and then we're going to wrap it up next week. I got kind of some fun things we're going to do with it next week. So anyway, let's watch this clip. And if I could get the lights out.